Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to Football Theory. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rob Babers. Pleased to be joined by the newest member of the On Texas Football family, my good friend and esteemed colleague and co-worker, Jeff Howe. We'll get into a little bit of the Texas-Ohio State game. I mean, I know we're 90-something days away, but everybody's really excited about this matchup. May end up being the biggest game of the season when it's all said done. Definitely the biggest game of the season looking ahead to the start of the college football season. So we're going to break down the Ohio State side of things. They got two new coordinators, and so we're going to take some of the time in football theory the next couple of weeks to look at those new coordinators and the pieces Ohio State has and how those new coordinators are going to try to utilize those pieces and what that offense could look like, what the defense could look like. And today we're going to pay attention to the defensive side of things with Matt Patricia going up against the offensive intellect of one Steve Sarkisian. But before we do that, let's thank our fantastic sponsor. We really appreciate Laura Baker. She's been the sponsor of Football Theory since we started this thing, so really appreciate her support. Football Theory brought to you by accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So please give her a call or a shout today if you have any concerns or questions regarding real estate in the Austin area. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or you can reach out to her at laura@andyallenteam.com. That's Laura at andyallenteam.com. And we appreciate Laura and her team for being a part of our team here at On Texas Football. All right, Jeff, I want to start getting into, because, with the new coordinators and, Matt Patricia on the defensive side of things, Brian Hartline on the offensive side of things for Ohio State, you could look at that as kind of an advantage for Ohio State because Texas doesn't really quite know how that Ohio State defense and how that Ohio State offense are going to look. That there are certain trademarks, certain tendencies of these, well, not the Brian Hartline, really, of Matt Patricia, who we dive into today. And that is how you'll kind of build your game plan. And they're going to be trying to get the ball to their playmakers, Jeremiah Smith, Cardinal Tate in that conversation. Of course, they got the tight end, who's also a really good player for them. So, they're going to try to get the ball to their best players, but you don't really know how they're going to weaponize those players. And today I want to dive into the defensive side of things and talk about Matt Patricia and how he is going to really his vision and how he's going to come in and try to weaponize some of the best players for Ohio State. And that's what I want to look at today. So we'll do offense next week. Let's just focus on defense and talk about Matt Patricia and the playmakers on defense that he'll be trying to highlight and he'll be trying to weaponize.
Yeah, let's just start with Caleb Downs, Rod. That's probably the easiest one, for a couple of different reasons. One, he might be the best defensive player in the country. Anthony Hill's in that conversation. Colin Simmons is in that conversation, but without question, Caleb Downs is in that conversation at safety. I think two, and this is really my big question about Matt Patricia. You look at Ohio State in the defensive structure they had under Jim Knowles, which, Texas fans, we got familiar with Jim Knowles, knowing him in the Big 12 with his defenses at Ohio State. He implemented the three high safety that's so in vogue in the Big 12. Kind of evolved it as he got to Ohio State, but having the freedom of, it's one thing to have a guy that's like a perfect fit to be that middle field safety in a three high system. But when you got Caleb Downs as that middle field safety, it's almost impossible, Rod, to go away from him because the freedom he has, especially against the run, but even in the pass, it's really hard to kind of isolate your game plan to say, okay, we're not going to try to go at Caleb Downs because that's the point of having a really good middle field safety in a three high. The question, what we don't know is how much, if any, of that three high structure is Matt Patricia going to keep, or the Jim Knowles structure, period. Now, they're going to base out of a four down nickel defense, which is kind of what everybody bases out of. But Matt Patricia's talked about being multiple and maybe infusing more 3-4 elements into Ohio State's scheme. Now, why is the 3-4 important? He's from the Bill Belichick tree, which means he's from the Nick Saban tree. Those guys base out of a three-man front and some kind of quarters coverage on the back end. All the Belichick Saban guys, that's what they do at their core as defensive guys. So how much of that do we see early? How much of the Jim Knowles defense do they keep early? Because it's one thing, Rod, to think, yeah, this is what we want to be, but are you really going to get out? How much are you going to get outside of the box against an opponent like Texas? That if you don't communicate and nobody's on the same page schematically on your side of the ball, man, you could be giving up explosive plays by the bunches, and you could really find yourself up against it. So there's got to be a balancing act for Matt Patricia in terms of putting his own stamp on it and doing what these guys are comfortable doing.
Yeah, I think there's a few hints that the defense is going to be a fusion, right? An amalgamation of what Jim Knowles did, maybe the framework, some of the principles, and some of the trademark signatures of a Matt Patricia defense. So and some of the clues are they have the co-DC is Tim Walton. It's going to be the co-DC, and he was there with him during a couple of those nose years. And I believe the pass game coordinator is Matt Guerrieri. Hope I pronounced his name correctly. And he was there last year too. So I think the emphasis to make sure that you kind of pair Matt Patricia up with some of the guys who know the defense, know the ins and outs from the defense, know the subtle nuances of it from the Jim Knowles system. I think that's key. To me, it's a clue that, yes, they are indeed going to try to hybridize and fuse these two defensive schemes. And to your point, the beautiful thing about Matt Patricia, this is why it may have been a great hire. He is known for having truly a multiple defense. Like it is, and he talks about it's truly a multiple defense. And here's the quote from Matt Patricia. I went and got some quotes from him. He said, "I've coached all of it. I've coached 3-4, 4-3, nickel, big nickel, dime, all those packages, 4 down fronts, 5 down fronts, odd spacing, just so you kind of do it through the course of the year." To me, it's all like, hey, that guy can do this or that guy can do this. And then I also think it creates roles. So it's not always the same 11 on the field. So you can have a really good skill set and you can do something. If it's in a critical situation, then you got to get you in that spot. And then he says, help you be in that situation to help you win the game, help us win the games. So he can coach anything. And he's talked about how essentially he lets the players really dictate what the scheme is going to be from his team to different team. Here's another quote from him. He says, "My whole goal is to try to figure out what you do well. How do I put you in the best position to go in the field and do that job well to the best of your ability? Because if you can play fast, you can play aggressive, because you know I have you in your skill set, then you're going to be disruptive as a defensive player. You're going to help us win as a defense, win as a team, and we can fit the pieces around where everybody goes in that accord. And I go from there." And when he's with the Detroit Lions, here's another quote from his days of the Lions. He said, "I'm really trying to find the best players we can. It's not like we're going to have 4 linebackers, 4 of this and 4 of that. It might be a situation where we come out this saying these are our top 10 guys. Now, we obviously can't be with 8 defensive linemen and 1 linebacker, but you want to find out what are the best guys you have, and then we'll fit the scheme around the best players. We're just trying to get the best players on the field that we can." All right. So he said the scheme is not something that's necessarily locked into exactly what it has to be. He said you kind of want to make sure you tailor what you do to the players that you have so that you can perform at a high level out on the field. Based on my research of Matt Patricia, and I'm sure the same thing of Ryan Day, and based on some of the moves they've made to truly try to stabilize the coaching staff and the coaching moves, I think it will be somewhat of a fusion between Jim Knowles' framework and some of those core principles and what Matt Patricia is trying to achieve and trying to accomplish. We'll talk about some of that, but ultimately, that's why it may be a good hire if you don't want to go cold turkey from what Jim Knowles brought to you, which ended up being one of the best, if not the best defense in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another quote, Rod, that I want to mention real quick, just looking at some of his, when he's talking about multiplicity, and there's 2 positions that he mentioned. He mentions, I'll just read the quote. It says, "Multiplicity comes in different ways." And this is him speaking to the local media there in Columbus during the spring. So multiplicity comes in different ways. Nickel is huge. Big nickel, if you have some of those body types. Safety has always been one of those positions that's been fun to move around and put in different spots, especially when you have guys with big skill range. I do like the flexibility of the nickel and big nickel position. Linebackers are really critical in that too. Guys that can play on the ball and off the ball, Getting into different structures that way is fun. The defensive backs room is a great room. There's a lot of depth there. Let's get as many guys as we can in different roles. Now, if that doesn't sound like a Bill Belichick, Nick Saban apple that fell off of that tree, I don't know what does. To me, there's 4 guys, right? I think maybe the 4 best most impact guys, at least in game 1. This may be different, in the middle of the season, at the end of the season, and if Ohio State's in the playoff, but I think early on, obviously, we mentioned Caleb Downs.
I got 6 guys listed. I'm gonna see if you got the same 6 that I have.
Obviously, Caleb Downs is number 1 on that list.
Yep.
Styles, both those guys. I think the lot impact trophy, for whatever reason, it's the first watch list that comes out. It just came out this week. Both those guys are on that, but both those guys are probably their 2 biggest proven commodities. I think Hartford at safety, just because Matt Patricia talked about Malik Hartford in the spring as one of those guys. He could play in the box. He could play deep. Maybe use him in some of that big nickel type stuff. So Malik Hartford, I think, is one of those guys. I think CJ Hicks is another one of those guys, former prospect. So, if your 4 best guys, your 4 impact guys right out of the gate, at least early on, when you're trying to build a game plan against Texas, 2 linebackers, and CJ Hicks is kind of a rush type guy, kind of like how Texas would use Anthony Hill, and then 2 safeties. I think that's where they're going to try to be really flexible, Rod. And that, that's going to give Arch Manning a lot to look at if you're moving around your linebackers and safeties. They have to reload their entire defensive line. And even though it's Ohio State and they're really good, they got a lot of talent. When you're reloading your entire defensive line, you got to make use with what you have when you're opening with an opponent like Texas and scheming. If you're Matt Patricia, scheming against an offense like Sark, where you're trying to match up all these signatures that we talk about in the Steve Sarkisian offense, you better have some versatile players that you can keep on the field and get into any structure at any given time. So I think those 4 guys, Malik Hartford and Caleb Downs at safety, CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles at linebacker, those, in addition to the 2 guys you're going to mention, Rod, those are 4 guys to keep an eye on. I think those guys, how much can they move and how versatile can Matt Patricia be in terms of changing structures with those 4 guys on the field at all times? That's going to give Arch Manning a lot to look at. It's going to give Sark a lot to think about as he's putting this game plan together. But you got to make use of what you got in terms of your proven commodities right out of the gate.
No, that's money, Jeff. It's a great point because it was something that I was going to kind of dive into. That's how I know me and you think along. Great minds think alike here on Football Theory. I had 3 of those 4. Full disclosure, I did not have Malik Hartford. But that's great about the big nickel thing because he's a huge fan of big nickel. If you want to look at his tendencies, he loves big nickel to really kind of match up on some of those early standard downs that may be second and long, something like that. He likes to match up with a lot of big nickel, which, by the way, they can do that. So I love that you brought up about Malik Hartford. But I want, and this is why I think it's interesting because I got another quote from him about how they're teaching in the spring. And he said this about their teaching methodology in the spring. He said, quote, "We're teaching conceptually." He said, "It's a conceptual teaching. That's what we're really trying to do for position depth. If you can teach it in a conceptual way, then you can plug people in different spots. I think it takes the team to a much further place than just memorization of an assignment." He also went on to talk about, he dropped that word multiplicity. We're big fans of it here on Football Theory. We use that term a lot. He said, "I think the guys have done a good job with the multiplicity of some of the things that we're doing right now. Moving around, being in some different spots. Just to get an evaluation of it. Our pad level and hand placement have improved critical fundamentals for controlling leverage in front." So he's talking about moving guys around. The reason you teach conceptually, even Sark talks about this, he teaches the wide receivers conceptually. Why? Because he wants them to know all the different positions. All right, all the different wide receiver positions in the offense. So essentially, he's got like these different movable chess pieces. And the same thing is true defensively. You want to teach it conceptually because it promotes multiplicity. Guys being able to move around, guys being able to take on different roles, and guys having position flex. That's exactly what it is. He didn't reveal too much there, but he revealed just enough. And Jeff talked about it too. And we start looking at Caleb Downs. He's the ultimate position flex safety. Elite against the run, elite versus the pass. So essentially, the reason he's great in that 3 high, because if he drops back and he's the deep safety, he's a threat. You don't want to throw it deep to him. If he drops down to intercept the intermediate short routes, that's a problem for you too as a quarterback. And if he drops down as a run defender, he's elite as a run defender. You can use him he can be your big nickel if you want him to. Like he's that good. Essentially have your 3 safeties on the field. So he's versatile. He's a position flex guy. You brought up Sonny Styles, who, by the way, for those who don't know, played safety. Last spring, he was a safety.
Yep.
And his full season at linebacker, his first full season linebacker was last year, and he was phenomenal. By the way, he actually had a really good game against Texas, other than giving up that wheel route to Jaden Blue. Another guy that they've talked about, Arvell Reese. Here's a quote I got it from James Laurinaitis about Arvell Reese, the other linebacker. Sounds kind of like how they're using some of the guys like Brad Spence and some of the other linebackers for Texas, using him on the edge. This is what he said about Arvell Reese. His length and his ability to move around and position flex makes him all the more valuable. This is what James Laurinaitis, the linebackers coach, said. He said, we're realizing everything Arvell Reese can do, and it's a lot. Someone tells me they're moving that guy around a lot too. So I put him on the list as a guy that moves around. I've been hearing things about Edric Houston. He's an edge defensive end that now moved to D tackle for them. Jermaine Matthews was the wide receiver that transferred, I believe, from and he's now he's playing cornerback and nickel for him. He's cross-training at both of those spots. They're doing some things, in my opinion, that are gonna help the whole multiplicity theme for Matt Patricia. And like you said, essentially what he wants to do is he wants to make it tough for opposing quarterbacks to ID who has what responsibility in the defense. Same thing Texas is trying to do with their position flex and cross-training with guys on defense as well. So just a couple of guys that just to keep an eye on who may fit exactly what Matt Patricia is trying to do, which I do believe is position flex, multiplicity, being able to move different pieces around various fronts. And we'll go over this in a second, kind of his tendencies and trademarks and things he likes and prefers as defensive coordinator. But I think what he's going to do at Ohio State is really maximize and weaponize a lot of these kind of hybrid athletes, actually, that they have kind of stockpiled on defense.
The one guy in terms of their proven commodities, returning guys, whatever you want, whatever group you want to put those guys in, that they probably won't move around a ton is Davidson Igbinosun, the corner. So former transfer, 16-game starter last year. He's their number one corner and, one of their top returning guys on either side of the ball. So he kind of like, think of him, if you're a Texas fan, think of him the way you think of Manny Muhammad. Like, probably not going to move around a ton. You're just going to put him at corner and, hey, whether he's on the team's third best receiver, their best receiver, whatever, he's got a role and he's going to play it and he's going to be on an island. So Igbinosun's a guy too that we need to mention. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, but maybe not as much. I say that now, it could change, but maybe not as much position flex in terms of the other guys. But that makes sense, right? Again, when you're replacing your entire defensive line, you're looking for playmakers, right? You don't have Tyleik Williams anymore. You don't have Jack Sawyer anymore. You're missing a lot of those guys that helped you win a national championship. You got to maximize your playmakers somehow. And hey, it may be 1 week, Caleb Downs being a box safety, a box nickel might be the best way to use him. The next week, it might be a single high safety. The next week, it might be a safety in a 2-high structure. It might be playing him traditional nickel. I don't know. That's going to be the hard part for Sark to figure out, especially with Downs. How's Matt Patricia going to use him? But I want to just reinforce this about Caleb Downs. Because Texas fans, we've seen, and those of us that follow the team, we're getting to see the evolution of one of the best players in the country. We saw him game 2 when he was at Alabama, his second game, and all what you heard, if you followed his recruitment and followed everything leading up to that week, this is a guy that started right out of the gate as a true freshman defensive back for Nick Saban. I don't take that lightly. And some of the things you heard, Nick Saban couching it as much as Nick Saban does things, was basically saying Caleb Downs had the potential to be one of the best defensive backs to ever play for him, to ever come through that Alabama program. Mm-hmm. And think about the number of guys that have gone on to be first-round picks and all pros and pro bowlers and multi-millionaires in the NFL. That's saying a mouthful. Then we got to see him at the end of his one season in the Jim Knowles 3-high structure. Now we're going to get to see him under Matt Patricia in this game. And who knows, maybe Texas and Ohio State rematch in the playoff. I don't know, but it's kind of fun from just a football theorist standpoint, Rod, to kind of get to see the growth of a guy like Caleb Downs. Even though he's not a conference opponent for Texas, we're really getting to see him from, the genesis of him as a player to now he's in that conversation to be the number 1 overall pick in the 26th draft.
No, he is. He's the best safety in the country, and this is his 3rd DC in his 3rd year. Like, think about that. And usually that would slow a player's development down. And he actually is still going at an accelerated rate of development. And NFL scouts love it because he's playing in all these different systems. He's playing in all these different systems, so you're starting to see his versatility. There's no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I believe Pro Football Focus had him as the best returning safety in back-to-back years.
He's in that rare group, and I'm not saying he is this guy, right? But when I think about safeties on that level, like you think about a guy like Sean Taylor at the college level, where it's like, yeah, safety's not a real valued position in the NFL. Well, I don't care if he's a safety or not. He's a valued player.
Yeah.
Caleb Downs goes beyond the safety position, if that makes any sense, in terms of his value, not just to the NFL, but to Ohio State.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, you're talking about just a football player at that point, not the position.
100%.
You're not like you look. It's like you don't draft running backs high, but you should draft Bijan high.
It's kind of the same thing. I'm glad what our eyes saw to hear guys like Todd McShay during the draft process to bring him back to Texas. When Todd McShay comes out and he says, I think the number was 8. He said, you can't tell me there are 8 better players in this draft than Jahdae Barron. Like, was Travis Hunter a better corner than Jahdae Barron? Maybe. Could you have found a better safety? Maybe. But how many guys were just better pure football players than Jahdae Barron in the draft and last year in college football? Not very many. That's what we're talking about with Caleb Downs.
Yeah, just to give you a little perspective on it. So Pro Football Focus, since they've been doing their top returning players, they do like the top returning players every year. And Pro Football Focus has been around since 2014 or something like that, I believe.
We're a decade into the PFF era.
I believe so. Yeah, decade plus. They've had 4 players now that have been basically back-to-back years as their top returning player. Trevor Lawrence did it. Derek Stingley did it. Brock Bowers did it. And Caleb Downs is at their position, like the top returning player at their position, back-to-back years. So he's in that group.
Are those guys any good?
I mean, they were all like top 15, top 2, you know what I mean? Like that's just special. If you love football folks or whether you hate them, that puts them in a pretty rare group of players. So I agree. The guys. That's why, to your point, when you started out the whole thing saying, "Well, what is he going to do with Caleb Downs?" That's the number one question. How are you going to use him? I do believe that's part of why they want to have this multiplicity approach and position flex approach, because they have to be able to move other guys around to move him around. You can't just move one player around.
Right.
But then you got 11 pieces on the board. It's a chess game. I got to move one piece around, but I also got to move the other piece around. So you need multiple guys who have position flex to truly weaponize, all right, that ability. And I think that's why you're going to have more guys. Need to have guys at linebacker you can move around, and you'd have a couple of guys like you brought up, Malik Hartford, at safety who can move around, so I can do freaky things with him on the 3rd and the 2nd level. So that's really what it all comes down to. I think a lot of this is our 2 best players are Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, and they're kind of funky multi-purpose positional flex pieces, and we're going to use every bit of it. And if you think you're going to know where they are down to down, then you are mistaken. You would not be able to consistently figure out Caleb Downs is doing this. He's a deep safety every down. Nope, he ain't gonna be a deep safety every down, and he ain't gonna be at the linebacker, a big nickel every down. They're gonna move him around, and they should, so that they can make it tougher for offenses to try to identify where he is. Because if you don't know where he is, he's gonna make a play and make you regret that decision.
I do think, though, Rod, I feel like I need to say this. There's a difference between being multiple and being exotic, right? All defenses are multiple. And today, especially when you face an offense like Sark's, you better be multiple. You better have multiple fronts you can get into, multiple coverages you can get into, multiple looks. Hey, we can drop 7 because we got guys that can cover. We can rush 5 or 6, whatever it is. And you better have some versatile chess pieces, especially on the rare occasion if Sark decides that they get in a rhythm and they decide they want to tempo you and you can't sub, well, you better have guys in there that you trust to be able to get the calls in and be able to move around and be able to execute. But being exotic, I'm a firm believer if you've got great defensive personnel like Texas has had the last few years, like Ohio State has had, like Georgia typically has. You don't need to be that exotic all the time because you've got enough guys that can just win one-on-one matchups at all three levels of your defense. But I think for this opener, Matt Patricia might have to be more exotic because this Ohio State defense, at least under Matt Patricia, they don't have an identity yet. They don't know what their identity is. If this was Jim Knowles coming back to run this defense, they would have an identity. And I think for Sark, that would make the game planning not so much easier, but it would streamline things more if you were facing Jim Knowles because you know a little bit what to expect. But if I'm Matt Patricia, I probably am more exotic than maybe I otherwise would be just because they don't really know what to expect. Play that to your advantage, which is why, again, I sound like a broken record on this, Rod. If I'm Sark, I try to figure out if I can run the football. I want to try to get my running game going as soon as possible. And I think it starts up front with those three guys on the interior, with Neto and DJ Campbell at the guard positions and Cole Hudson at center, especially given the fact that in your three losses last year, the two losses to Georgia and against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, you were abysmal trying to run the football. You didn't have a tough day. You were horrible trying to run the football, not effective whatsoever. So you can't be stubborn with them. But if I'm Sark, I go in, hey, if they want to do all that stuff with their linebackers and safeties, that's cool. Let's try to go get in a rhythm on the ground and see if we can't get our offense on schedule that way.
Well, that's the best, antidote, right, to the three highs. Like, we can run the ball. We'll give a damn what you're doing back there in the three high. You ain't confusing us with some of your funky exotic looks because we're just running the football, downhill football. So if you can, great. As a coach, you got to plan on worst case scenario, and maybe you won't be able to run the football. I will say this. So I don't know. I think your run, I'm with you, the run game, Sarkis said it's an emphasis in the offseason, and we'll see if they can have more of we talked about this, more variety in the run game. Because if it's just, hey, outside zone, there are some teams who have the personnel and they've had time to scheme it up, Arizona State, where that one tent pole or that one scheme that you have kind of built your identity around, it won't work. You're going to have to be able to pivot to other run schemes. And Texas just really couldn't do that enough last year. So Arizona State, Ohio State, Georgia, as we talked about, they shut down the outside zone, you shut down a Texas run game. They can't allow that to happen anymore.
No. Especially when you face a team that runs that three high structure or some semblance of it. Outside zone is almost the worst run concept you can use against.
Yeah, you want to be downhill on them. You want to be running.
It takes too long to develop. The safety is going to be able to get his run fit. He's going to be able to read it quicker, and you're going to be just banging your head against the wall. It's got to be downhill, and it's got to be fast. That's why if you go back to 2022. Now, granted, Bijan was great. Like Bijan can run against any.
He can run against anything, yeah.
But go back and watch that Iowa State game when they had to put the game away, when they had to try to create some distance between them and Iowa State, when they had that game-winning drive that ends with the Xavier Worthy whip route on the goal line. Go back and watch how much Roschon Johnson touched the ball.
Oh, yeah.
There is nothing finesse about Roschon Johnson. It sounds weird to say about a former quarterback. There's nothing fancy about Roschon Johnson running the ball. It's going to be downhill. It's going to be nasty, and it's going to be fast. That's the kind of run game you need to have against that three high structure. And something you've talked about, Rod, we talked about when is CJ Baxter going to be back? How's Christian Clark going to factor in? Another year for Jarrett Gibson. We've talked about all this stuff, but I love the fact that you keep coming back to what's Trey Wisner's body going to look like once he gets to game one after he's had a whole offseason to put some armor on his body. It may just be, hey, you beat Ohio State with Trey Wisner carrying the ball 15, 18 times and having a really good day.
Because you got basically a first half of the season running back and a second half of the season running back. I started for the first half. So you can just ride, just wear the wheels up of either one of those guys. I think that's kind of where the approach I would have. All right, I know we're getting close to the end of it, so let me give us a couple of tendencies of Matt Patricia. It's been a great conversation, and then we'll wrap things up. He likes man coverage. Ohio State last year, they were in cover one, man coverage, or cover zero, probably a little above 30% of the time, maybe 31, 32% of the time. With Detroit, they were always top 5 in man coverage rate. The Detroit line, when he was in Detroit, they were top 5 in man coverage rate year after year. They were bottom 5 in blitz rate in his first 2 years in Detroit, and I think they were bottom 8 in blitz rate his last year in Detroit in 2020. Which also maybe leads to the issue of how they're going to generate pressure, because they only blitzed over 20% of the time once when he was in Detroit. His last 6 seasons in New England, he was over 20% blitz rate 5 of those 6 seasons. But that was Belichick saying, hey, I need you to put some pressure on that guy. And when he did not have Belichick, he didn't blitz a lot. And if you look at the pressures generated, pressure rate ranking for Detroit, 13th, 18th, and 25th. So not great. He uses at least 5 DBs 76% of the time in his career. So he's going to use 5 DBs. But getting back to your point about Ohio State and good teams don't need to be exotic, they didn't blitz a lot last year, right? Texas didn't blitz a lot last year. Texas was a very low blitz rate. Ohio State was, I think, 62nd in blitz rate. So it wasn't really high. They're probably middle of the road right there, probably a long average. And in the playoffs, they were low. They were at 15% blitz rate in the playoffs. They were just like, nah. We get a lot of organic pressure with our 2 NFL edges, so they didn't create a lot of pressure with blitzes and with extra guys. They just did it with sim pressures, and they did it with organic pressure coming from the edges, as Texas knows all too well. So the low blitz rate, that might align with what Ohio State already wants to do. We talked about the organic pressure. Man coverage rate, like I said, he likes man coverage. He likes it on early downs. This will be the challenge, Jeff. Does Steve Sarkisian get greedy? Because on early downs, Matt Patricia likes to play man. Mm-hmm. And does he decide, man, I need to take me some shots on them early downs when I know he's going to be in man coverage? Because he gets a little bit more exotic and a little bit more innovative with the looks and a little bit more varied and multiple the deeper you get into the downs. On first down, a lot of the times, you're going to get, he likes a robber. That would probably be Caleb Downs coming down as a robber with a single high deep safety. As a matter of fact, I looked at single high rates. If you go look at it, he was top 5 in single height rate with the Lions. Every year they were there. They were top 5 in single height. And with the Pats, he was a defensive analyst in 2023. And the Pats were top 5 in single height rate. Belichick just likes single high a lot. So he can play man and then play some of those matchup cover 3. So those are some of his tendencies. He likes twists and stunts in the interior gaps, in the A and the B gaps. He wants to isolate edge rushers on the edges, on islands with the tackles, so they can just try to win one-on-ones. And that's why he likes a lot of games being played in the interior gaps. And that's some of the tendencies. He likes a lot of 2-man, but he likes man coverage and 2-man on predictable passing downs, like 3rd and long, 2-man, which is basically you play man under with the defenders with 2 deep safeties. Those are some of the tendencies that he likes.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, Rod. Two things that I'll add. One, the key to me, as far as what you're talking about, does Sark get greedy? Does he try to force the issue maybe with some shots early against man coverage? I think that's all going to be dictated by what gets Arch into a rhythm, which we've seen different Texas quarterbacks over the years, especially the last few years. Like what got Sam Ehlinger in a rhythm? It's quarterback run game. Like that guy, that got Sam's juices flowing and that got your offense started, right? With Quinn, it was the quick game. Like boom, boom, boom. Just let him go, whether it's your RPOs, your screens, whatever it is. That gets Quinn in a rhythm, that gets him going. What is that for Arch? Is it shot plays? Is it maybe just some, 8 to 12 yard out cuts or deeper in cuts, whatever it is? The sooner Sark figures that out, the better off you're going to be in terms of Ohio State's hands. Like, all right, we got to do something else. We got to get out of man coverage. We got to play some zone because we're getting picked apart, right? And they've got great personnel, but if you're Texas, you've got great personnel too, and you believe you've got, and I believe they've got a phenom, a prodigy at quarterback. So he can make you wrong. Arch Manning can make Matt Patricia wrong with his ability to execute some of those throws, whatever those throws are that are going to get him comfortable. I think the other part to that I was going to mention, it's going to be a really one of the advantages Texas has. Kerry Joseph's NFL experience, because keep in mind, he's going to be working with the defense. He's an NFL offensive assistant. He's also got a defensive background, but he's going to be helping PK out in terms of, figuring some things out. He's going to be helping. So he's doing that, but he can also kind of help Sark with getting inside Matt Patricia's head because he's seen him enough. He's studied him enough. Like, hey, what does he like to do on, if he's going to dial up a blitz on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long? What is it going to be? Like, what's that shell going to look like pre-snap? Or, hey, in goal line, does he like to play man on goal line? Does he like how does he play man on the goal line? Does he play a little zone? Like, what he showed? So I think Kerry Joseph, yes, he's working with Pete Kwiatkowski right now, but I also think the feedback he can give Sark, just as somebody who's been in the NFL and gone against Matt Patricia and seen what Matt Patricia brings to the table. I'm not saying he's going to be the X factor, but that's a really, really good ace in the hole for Sark to have, just so he can bounce some things off in the game from a game planning standpoint.
All right, good stuff there, Jeff. All right, let's thank our sponsor, Laura Baker, before we end our program. Football Theory brought to you by accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So please give her a shout today if you have any concerns or questions regarding real estate in the Austin area. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or visit Laura at andyallenteam.com. That's Laura at andyallenteam.com. Thank you very much to Laura Baker, and thank you to Matthew behind the scenes, twisting and tweaking the dials. He's the real MVP. Jeff, great stuff as always, brother. Appreciate the knowledge. I always leave here a smarter football theorist because of our conversations. And thank you guys out there, each and every one of you, for joining us. Next week, we'll jump to the offensive side of the ball for Ohio State. How does PK match wits with Brian Hartline, the new offensive play caller? We'll dive into that and more right here. But thank you guys, and for Jeff and for Matthew and for accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Hook 'em horns.